This week, we discuss our test results for the 2020 Hyundai Venue. We talk buying new cars, low-cost used cars, and leases during these strange times. And we answer your questions, including why does it seem so hard to find a Kia Telluride these days? Next, on Talking Cars. Hey, welcome back. I'm Keith Barry.
I'm Jake Fisher.
And I'm Ryan Pizlakowski.
And hey, Ryan, it's good to see you. You're a new addition to the remote team. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Just hiding out here in my office, closet of an office, if I will. But just staying busy and staying home, staying safe.
Yeah, as we hope you're all doing, and we're giving you a little something to watch in the meantime. Take your mind off everything. But first, some questions related to coronavirus. We've got lots of questions about car buying during the pandemic and the sort of resulting economic crisis. And I just like to kind of go at them all at once because they're all sort of variations on a similar theme. You know, is what I'm looking for there? What about leases? What about should I get a new car? What about used cars? So. Jake, I'll throw that to you. What have you seen out there? Because things are a little chaotic in the automotive world right now, right?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, look, first of all, people are not buying a lot of cars, obviously. What we're seeing is that the automakers are really kind of doing everything they can to make the sales when they have the ability to do it. So actually, we've been purchasing vehicles here at the track, which is kind of a strange thing, but we've been able to do it with social distancing. So we actually purchased a brand new BMW 228i, which we were able to do without actually setting foot into a dealership or setting foot into the car. So they actually delivered the vehicle to our track and without us actually even touching the vehicle. I mean, we're still purchasing anonymously. We're only letting them know where we are when they're actually getting the delivery of the vehicle. But it's definitely opened up a kind of a new purchasing possibilities for us. If you're looking for buying a car, there are definitely some discounts there to be had. But you know, it's really kind of hit or miss depending on what those dealerships are going to be able to do and how much they're going to be able to negotiate for you. So it's definitely an interesting time to buy.
I mean, what I've been hearing is that there's plenty of inventory because just as much as the car plants are idled, at the same time nobody's buying, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's true. I mean, one really interesting thing. I mean, I just kind of keep on coming back to, you know, as a consumer, you know, I mean, should you be buying right now? And I think one of the interesting things is that there's so much uncertainty right now. So, I mean, we're working from home. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to us are working from home. Will you be working from home in a year? You might be. I mean, there's a lot of data showing that everyone's kind of reassessing this. So perhaps the kind of car that you are looking for maybe a month ago might be not the right car for you a year from now. And maybe you don't know right now. But I think right now would be a great opportunity to really do some research and say, you know what, I was really just looking for this type of vehicle. But if my needs change, I should I do some research for that type of vehicle. So I think it's a great opportunity to kind of broaden what you're interested in and taking a look at some different segments of the market.
Yeah. So Ryan, do you have anything to add about, like, you know, leases or anything like that? Because I've been getting a lot of questions from folks about, you know, my lease is ending. Should I extend it? I've been offered the ability to extend it. We have a whole article about this on consumerreports.org. And we also have an article about how to buy a car without setting foot in a dealership. So if you are in the situation where you're lucky enough to buy a car, then, you know, check that out. But yeah.
Yeah. So the lease deals actually, they're extending. A lot of manufacturers and dealers will extend your lease for at least a little while during this, just to keep you home and away from everything. It's a matter of making a phone call. We've actually had, you know, we had a story where someone reached out to the dealer, and once she got through to them, It was a quick process, and they extended her lease, and it was a pretty painless process. But everything Jake said was true, and it is happening. It's it's just an interesting time to be alive, and an odd way to buy a car. But to Jake's point, it's definitely worth thinking about the future a little bit, because things are uncertain. You may be working from home for a long period of time, and maybe you don't even need a car. Or money wise, are you going to be able to actually afford this in the future?
Yeah.
They're scary thoughts, but it's all real. And I had this thought too of, like, if you have a car right now and it's on its last leg, or it needs some maintenance, it might be wise to just maybe invest a little into that, just to keep it going in the meantime, just in case. Maybe buying a new car, even a used car right now, is not smart for your situation, but that's something you have to decide for yourself.
Yeah, Ryan, I think that's really important. What you're saying, that, if you have an older car, it might make sense just kind of keep it alive. And if you're going to sell it, it's worthwhile having a car that's, good, even if you're selling it. But, I'm kind of reminded to, some of the digital products that we always kind of talk about at Consumer Reports. And one of the things that we've always talked about is trying to calculate the exact right time economically to sell your car. Everyone always asks this, it's like, well, at what point is my car so bad that I'm spending more money keeping it alive than buying a new car? And
it's
the
like
answer,
timing the stock market,
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Everyone wants to know that. When's the right time to sell or buy?
Yeah.
But the answer when we do the calculations is kind of surprising, but actually really simple. The right answer, if it's just purely economic, we're not talking about, we know new cars are safer and all that, but economically, when am I spending more money on my older car than buying a new one? The answer is never. You really just keep the car. I mean, even if you're putting a new transmission in the car like every other year, it's way cheaper than what you're going to lose if you purchase a new car with all those steep depreciation curves in the first couple of years.
And for me, I mean, I got a notice on my lease, and it said, it said, please don't call us. It just keep paying, and we'll extend it until it was supposed to be due in a month or 2 months. And they said we'll extend it till December. So I'm just going to keep paying it. Yeah.
The dealership
they don't want those cars to come back to the lots because they don't have room for them. They're clogging up they're sort of clogging up the pipeline of inventory. Also, all these rental car companies are shedding their fleets because people aren't renting cars anymore, and as a result, the auctions where all these cars get sent through are clogged up, and they don't want late model used cars. So that's another reason why returning your lease might not be the best idea right now. In addition to not staying safe, reducing your financial and health risks. But if you have a lease right now, I'd say stay in it.
Well, these are strange times indeed when the dealerships are saying, please don't call us. That's definitely different. But I mean, it's kind of like what's going on in the oil market right now. I mean, they're still producing all this oil. There's no place to put it. They get to the point where they have to pay people to take the oil. Hopefully we'll get to that with cars, where they actually pay you to take the cars because there's no place to put them. So we'll let you know when that happens.
So those are some questions about newer cars, about newer used cars. But I think right now, there are a lot of questions out there, a lot more like this one from Halen in St. Paul, who asks us, I'll soon be in the market for a used car with a budget around $2,000. I realize that severely limits my options, but I need a car as soon as possible, and that's all my budget allows for. I'm not too picky on what I want, as long as it's reliable and safe. And good job, Halen, because those are the two most important things in a car. And that's coming from someone who values a lot of other things, but those are the two I won't compromise on. I know you recommend buying a car with electronic stability control, ESC, but most cars in my price range don't have it or are extremely high mileage. Is it smarter to buy a car with more safety or a lower mileage car that could last me longer? And Ryan, ESC, what is electronic stability control? Can you talk a little more about that? Because it's been a while since we talked about it, because it's been standard on all new cars starting in like 2012, I think. Yeah. So
right. Yeah, we kind of forget about it. It just comes in the car now. So ESC is electronic stability control, and it's a system in the car that basically keeps your car from spinning out. It applies brakes if you got into a evasive maneuver and the car started to spin out or something. It basically straightens the car back out on the road. It's probably the greatest thing since seatbelts. Very important. It is tough because in that price range, you got to really do some research to find that.
Yeah.
But it is possible. You just got to look around.
Well, the good news, we did a little research. So Halen, if you're out there, go to safercar.gov, and that's NHTSA's website about traffic safety, crash test, all that sort of stuff. But they also have a list of which cars ESC was optional on, and that goes back to 2005. And on the vehicles that it was optional on, you want to pull you don't need to pull a full vehicle history report that you pay for, but you do want to at least go to Carfax, put in the VIN, and see how the car was originally equipped, because then you'll see whether ESC was standard on the car, because the dealer now might not know that. And also, you'll find out other important safety features, because back in 2005, some of these cars didn't even have, side airbags were an option on some really good cars in 2005, 2006. So you don't want a car without those either. So, I mean, looking around, Jake, you said, we all kind of went online. I found an '05 Prius that in St. Paul that was around 2,400. You might be able to negotiate down a little bit. And it had, that's a car that'll last forever. What'd you find, Jake?
Well, first of all, when you're looking at used cars, it's not the same answer for all the vehicles. So an old vehicle by one manufacturer might be an unreliable vehicle. Another manufacturer might still have a lot of life left in it. And the same thing with safety, because they actually added the safety equipment all different years. So as an example, when my wife was buying a new car, her old Prius, she's a 2006 Prius that now my son is driving, but 2006 Prius, 150,000 miles, really very trouble-free vehicle. They offered us $1,500 at the dealer to trade it in. And here's a car that has a lot of life left in it. It has stability control on it. It's kind of a really good choice. And, you may want to take a look at maybe not just dealers, but also if you look at Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, a lot of times those less priced vehicles are there. That's where they are. These are people who were offered maybe lowballed at the dealership for a trade-in, and they're trying to look and see if they could get another couple $100 for it. Of course, right now,
the only problem with that just now is that it's some of those private sales are harder to do because of some restrictions. So I don't know, depending upon where you are, those DMVs might be closed. Those private sales, they don't have a staff of people to sanitize the car and deliver it to you. So that is a riskier proposition.
And actually, in normal times, it's more risky too.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have a warranty. Now you're dealing with somebody who you don't know. There are options to have there. The other thing to keep in mind is when you're looking at these older vehicles, it's not just stability control. So in 2012, they made stability control standard, but that also made anti-lock brake standard. So before 2012, you may be finding vehicles that don't even have anti-lock brakes. That means that if you have wet conditions or icy conditions, you hit the brakes, you can't even steer the vehicle. So that is a huge improvement in terms of safety too. The other thing I would like to add is, you did your homework and looked at different sites. Look at Consumer Reports, because if you do find a vehicle that you're interested in, you can go and, you certainly could look at our used car marketplace, but on each one of the years of each one of those vehicles, we do have the equipment. So all the safety equipment. So we tell consumers exactly when side airbags were added, when stability control was added, when it became optional, when it was standard, and all those types of things. So that's a great resource to kind of break down not just what is on that particular car, but also, say I'm looking at a 2007, what's it? You'll find it, in 2008 is when they made stability control standard. So that is kind of a really useful thing to kind of narrow down your search.
And we searched, I found an '05 Prius with standard ESC, with the optional ESC,
right,
on this particular vehicle. It was at a local dealer in St. Paul, so it might still be open. It was for about $2,500, but you might be able to negotiate now, especially with the sort of glut of used cars out there. Some of these dealers might want to get stuff off their lots. We also at consumerreports.org have a list of cars that get to 200,000 miles. And some of these cars, it's no problem. I sold my '04 Prius with 165 on it, and the next owner owned it for years. But there are some cars out there that, and also depending upon how they're maintained, right, Ryan? That you might not want to pick up something that was someone else's car that was abused, right?
Right. Yeah. it's still kind of tough, but we gotta check the car out real thoroughly as you can. And you know, my advice also would be, to look for a car that was somewhat simpler. Some of these older German cars with all these little gadgets and things, you might want to stay away from that stuff. An older car with even a manual transmission, something like that, that's probably more the vein you want to go down.
Nothing's more expensive than a cheap luxury car.
Oh yeah.
I think
and
that's
some
true.
of those, unfortunately, were the ones that had ESC standard. You'll find the more expensive cars, but they'll also have 20 other things, an air suspension or something else that'll go wrong.
And they're intriguing because it's like, oh wow, this BMW is super cheap. And it's that car used to be $80,000 maybe, right? But it's a world of
Volvos, Saabs.
Yeah.
I think you could also kind of look at the vehicle and kind of make some assumptions. I mean, the Prius probably was not being street raced. There's probably a good chance of that. I mean, if you're looking at an older WRX, I don't know what they've done to all those cars.
If you can find a WRX for $2,000,
yeah, send it my way.
Oh, they're out there, but they ain't pretty.
No. So speaking of affordable cars, affordable new cars, we actually have new tests going up on our site, new test results going up, and for the Hyundai Venue SEL, this is a new car. It's a replacement for the Hyundai Accent hatchback, except this is a little more SUV-like. The powertrain, it has 121 horsepower, 1.6 liter 4-cylinder engine. It has a CVT. It's front wheel drive only. The one we bought was around $20,000, but they start at around $17,300 and go up to only around $22,000. And actually the base model still comes with a stick shift. So Jake, what is this? Where does it fit? Is it an SUV? Is it a hatchback? It's small. What is it?
It is a transportation unit. It's kind of in
it's a little more than that. It's a little more.
It's in the same vein, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, it doesn't fit normal classifications. It kind of the same way as the Kia Soul, which actually shares a lot of components with. So I think it's a great. I think the thing's brilliant. I mean, I just got to say, because it's, you take a vehicle like the Hyundai Accent and you kind of put it in this kind of like SUV box shape. And it's, you could say, okay, well, they're tricking people into making things as an SUV, but it's more than that, because actually if you get that kind of 2-box shape in it, you get a lot of interior room, a lot of function in this vehicle. So even though the thing it's very short, I mean, I think it's one of the shortest vehicles you could buy right now in terms of length. It has quite a bit of room inside, and it's actually kind of fun to drive. It's kind of nimble. I mean, it doesn't ride super well. It's pretty stiff, but it's kind of like a cheap and cheerful kind of vehicle that has a lot of function. And, it's got some, I mean, in terms of the equipment, I mean, the infotainment system works really nice, has a lot of features. In terms of safety,
Hyundai Kia infotainment, that sort of straightforward setup. Yeah.
It's got the features, but it's really well laid out, so it doesn't really frustrate you. Lots of standard safety features built into this vehicle. I mean, everything from standard forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking, standard pedestrian detection. So, I mean, it just really shows you could have something that's small, something that's inexpensive, something that's fuel efficient, and it gives you kind of what you need in terms of safety and some room too.
Ryan, you took this thing on the track, right?
I did. Yeah, it's so listen, I don't want to sound negative, but it's a $20,000 car and it has a ton of safety stuff in it, right? So that in itself is very appealing. But again, it's a $20,000 car. So in today's world, unfortunately, $20,000 for a brand new car is not a lot of money. I mean, that's pretty good. But this car is stiff riding. The seats are very basic. The engine's loud, it's buzzy, it's got a CVT in it. So the low powered engine really kind of activates that CVT to really flare up. But around the track, it did great in our avoidance maneuver. It's a smaller car. It doesn't have the greatest steering, but it's small. It's nimble. I mean, we turned a good speed through our avoidance maneuver, and even around the handling circuit, it was very secure, safe to drive. But again, it's got that cheaper feel to it.
Yeah.
But for the amount.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, just I keep going back to this. The safety features that you get for that kind of money, though, is it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and you can also, so something that I found really interesting was that we got two versions of this car. We rented the denim version from Hyundai, and that is the it's sort of basically top of the line, and it has a bunch of interesting little design flourishes that make it a really interesting car for not a lot of money. And it looked good. I mean, it had the two-tone paint. It had a little bit of extra embroidery on the seats. It had contrasting stitching and cloth, just these little extras. Even the taillights had they were embossed. The plastic was embossed with a design, and it looked good. And then we bought one, which was just a step down from that. And we bought the SEL, and it has the smaller wheels, and it has the single color paint, and it just doesn't look that good, I think. The one you see in the commercial is going to drive the same as the cheaper car, but it's not going to have that style. So that's, just sort of a little bit of buyer beware, that if you want a car that looks real good, and also none of them come with all-wheel drive, even though they look a little SUV-like. So just, keep that in mind. But for basic transportation, we've been getting a lot of questions about this car from people. I think something that's really interesting is that this car was aimed at Gen Z. It was one of the first cars that was aimed at those younger buyers who are getting their licenses and just, graduating from college now. And we're getting questions from older people, younger people, all ages about this car.
Well, a great way to attract older buyers is to market it to younger buyers, and we've seen that time and again. And I mean, quite honestly, I mean, if you kind of learn to drive on a Civic or a CRX or something, I mean, you probably aren't going to be that bothered by a stiff ride and a little bit of noise. And I think this type of vehicle can suit you really well. And Keith, in terms of the styling, I mean, the fact that it's so inexpensive, I mean, you bring up a great point. You can get all the bells and whistles, go up and get the higher trim line, and you can get all those things. Because if you look at even just like a normal compact car these days, when you start throwing on all the options, now you're at $30,000 for a Mazda 3 or something like that. And it's very easy to do. Here, you could get all of it, all the nice interior fixings. And the funny thing is that when you really come down to it, all those things that are luxury, in terms of the nice seats and whatever, they're all from suppliers. So it's all kind of like, what are they importing? What are they putting in? What are the tier 2, tier 1 suppliers going to put in? And you could get all that in a small package. And click all the boxes on that car. Yeah. You could afford it.
So check out our full review, all the info, all the numbers, everything for the Hyundai Venue at consumerreports.org. All right, now you've looked at us enough. It's time to look at you. If you want to end up in our little Hollywood Squares, round the horn style, the parade of faces, Brady Bunch, send a video question to TalkingCars@iCloud.com. And that's exactly what Lucas from Wichita did. He has a question about fuel economy.
Hi, Talking Cars. I just recently purchased a 2020 Mini Countryman All-4S. And just finished putting in the break-in miles on it. And I've noticed that I've been getting significantly higher fuel economy than the EPA estimated numbers on the window sticker when I bought it. I've been averaging about 33 miles per gallon combined, while the combined EPA numbers are about 26. And I do mostly city driving here in Wichita. My question to you is, can manufacturers report different fuel economy numbers than the EPA gives them? And if so, is it common for them to undershoot or overshoot these fuel economy numbers? Thanks. Keep up the good work.
So standards, are they really standards? And who's setting them? Jake.
Standards are standards, but it's a great question. And actually, there is a kind of a little dirty secret, a little known rule is that they can request a lower number. Not a lot of automakers do this, but I mean, look, in terms of the rules, the automaker has to report the EPA numbers, but the automaker can say, well, we'd like a lower EPA numbers than the testing show. And the reason they may do that is they really want to guard against customer dissatisfaction, or maybe have the people really excited to see that. I mean, it kind of comes from early on. I don't know if, if you go back into like the very first Priuses, for instance, they had like some crazy EPA number of 65 miles per gallon or something, or 60 miles per gallon. And then people would get like 40, which is phenomenal, especially phenomenal at the time. And people would be like, but I didn't get my 60. So in cases like that, the EPA does allow the automaker to say, well, we don't want to report 60, we want to report whatever. So it can happen. I don't know if that's necessarily happening with your vehicle, though, even though that rule is there. I think in terms of your vehicle and you look at the Mini, I think it all depends on what city is and what highway is. These are terms that are kind of thrown away. Honestly, they're test schedules. And in terms of the EPA, there's actually a whole bunch of calculations where they make a bunch of estimates. The truth is that city traffic in the heart of Midtown Manhattan is a whole lot different from city traffic in Hartford, Connecticut, or somewhere else. It really has to do with how many hard accelerations, how many hard stops, how much the idling time. So your mileage may vary is absolutely true. And my guess is your city traffic would probably be better on a lot of different vehicles too. So to be happy with the mileage you're getting, and it's kind of nice having a small car that has that great fuel efficiency.
And Ryan, that's why we do our own fuel economy tests, right?
Yeah, so we do a highway and a city test. The city test is actually right at our track, and the highway test we actually go out on a real highway and do it. And we put actual fuel meter in line in the fuel system, and we record the amount of fuel it uses. So just to kind of double check. And we've seen some discrepancies, but both ways, higher or lower. But in this case, I mean, be happy. That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Only they could do the same thing with a car payment.
I mean,
lower, not higher. Yeah.
I mean, our city is totally different from the EPA city. Our highway is different from the EPA highway. They're just kind of like show you the span that you may get. Really, the overall is really what to look for. But I mean, our highway, for instance, is a steady 65 miles per hour, so it's really going to be probably better than you're going to get. But it really just kind of shows the span.
Right.
Cool. Thanks for the video question. We've got another one from Kansas.
My name is Sean Knernschild, and I live in Topeka, Kansas. My question is about the 12-volt battery in electric cars. Do all the manufacturers use a 12-volt battery in addition to the main battery pack? If so, why do they do that? What if that 12-volt battery fails? Does the car still run or start? What charges the 12-volt battery? And why not just get rid of it? You'd save weight, and it'd be one less point of failure. Just run everything off the main battery pack. Just reduce the voltage down to 12 volts for that system. Thanks a lot.
That's a really interesting question. Does a car with batteries need extra batteries? And I remember with some of the first hybrids, that was an issue because someone's 12-volt starter battery would die, and it would be this weird little kind of golf cart style battery, and it was very very unique and expensive, but it wasn't as expensive as replacing the whole battery pack. So another example that's kind of what you're talking about is that on the Hyundai Ioniq and on the Kia Niro, on the hybrid versions of those cars, they took a portion of that larger battery and kind of partitioned it off to use as a battery for like a starter battery and for jump starts, essentially. And there's a button on the dashboard that you can press if you found that your car won't start, and it will basically activate that partition of the battery. It's an interesting setup, and it's the first car that has that. That's also a gas powered car. But Jake, there was something with the Tesla, right? The original Roadster.
So on those vehicles, kind of like the reserve fuel tank, right? I mean, older cars used to have, you actually flip a switch and go to the reserve tank. Yeah, I mean, the first Tesla Roadster actually didn't have a 12-volt battery at all. They wound up adding a 12-volt battery in the production line later on because they found it guarded against just completely bricking the battery when it just completely runs down. They needed external battery to kind of get everything going. So, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, clearly with what some of the newer cars are doing is a possibility of it, especially if you partition some of the battery for that 12 volt. I suspect going forward, we are going to see less and less 12 volt batteries just because of the cost savings of it. I mean, I think having that 12 volt is kind of like a safety bit there. And then if it dies, it's certainly a lot cheaper to replace. But it's a great question. You have so many batteries. Why do you need another battery?
And that also means that those are cars that you can't jumpstart. You can't use jumper cables on those. Well, at least on the Ioniq and the on the Niro, there's nowhere to put those jumper cables.
Yeah, I mean, if you have an electric car, I suppose you don't really need to jump start it. No, so I mean, there's a point there.
But on a hybrid,
Yeah, if you need to jump start that, you're in trouble.
Thanks for the video questions, TalkingCars@iCloud.com. On to some regular questions that were sent in. We got one from Hayes from Hartford, Wisconsin. The other Hartford asks, with many people having personal incomes reduced, some folks may look for replacement tires from lesser known brands. Some of these might be imported from overseas. Does the Department of Transportation or the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, do any testing on these tires to ensure they are safe for consumers? Or is the tire market a Wild West where the law of the land is buyer beware? Ryan, you've actually driven and tested some of these lower price tires, right?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think people do have some concerns with stuff like this. So all road going tires, so any tire that you can buy and put on your car and legally drive down the road with in the U.S. has to meet a minimum standard. So NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, has put forth and enforces these standards, federal standards. And it's kind of interesting because tire manufacturers actually have to do this testing themselves. And almost all these manufacturers will design to well above the minimum standard. I mean, tires are the only thing touching the road, huge safety component to a vehicle, right? So they're not going to play around with that. Getting your hands on some tires that would be that black market or whatever you want to call it would almost be very difficult because
you have to know a guy who knows a guy.
Yeah, I mean, my advice would be, check out, when you're buying these tires, go through some of the reputable, like Tire Rack or Discount Tire, places like that they're carrying, it's a reputable business, right? To the more to the point, I think, is the real concern should just be the performance of these tires because they are safe. We recommend you have a cheap set of no-name tires on your car as opposed to some old bald tires or mismatched tires, just because they're going to be or used tires. They're going to be safer. Yeah. And we've tested some tires that were less than half the price of a regular premium, a premium brand tire, and they've landed mid-pack. And they've done well. They do tend to fall towards the bottom, most of them. But again, they're safer than a worn out or, a used tire that you don't know anything about, that kind of thing. So it's a good question. But they, in general terms, these tires are safe. Their performance might vary.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of just like the car market. I mean, there's a lot of brands that people are still like, Kia, what's that? That's an off-brand. And, right. In time, they become mainstream brands. I mean, think of like Kumo or Hankook, I mean, these, a few years ago, people were kind of scratching their heads about, and now they're becoming quite mainstream.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hankook, Nexen, even Nexen's come way up. They make great tires. So they were always safe. They were just not as known about, so, and the other thing is if there was to be an issue with one of these tires and they got recalled and they weren't able to prove that these tires met those minimum standards, the legal recourse is insane. Like you just get in a lot of trouble. So it's not even worth that. So it's just very, very uncommon.
Yeah. Is there a stamp or something that Hayes should be looking for on a tire just to make sure, or if he's buying it at a Walmart or a BJ's or a Costco or something, he's probably going to do okay.
Yeah, I mean, listen, all these tires will have a DOT stamp on them, which shows there's some internal codes for the manufacturer, but it shows the plant and the date of manufacture that it was made. So it's good to look at that date. The last four numbers of that date or of that code is a date. It'll say maybe 2016, which means it was made on the 20th week of 2016. Those are some things you could look for.
Yeah. Excellent. Great advice and a good way to save money, especially on maybe an older car that you're not sure if you're going to be driving that many miles on it. So that's real good advice. Speaking of Kia and speaking of the meteoric rise of one particular vehicle from Kia, Farouk asks, well, at first he says, love the show. Keep up the good work as we all stay home through these difficult times. I will be in the market for a 3-row SUV soon, and all signs point to the Kia Telluride being the best option. But Telluride inventory is slim. I recently contacted a dealer to get pricing on the EX Telluride and was quoted a price $4,000 over MSRP, that manufacturer's suggested retail price. So it's suggested the dealer can charge whatever they want. At that price, a Toyota Highlander is within reach. This seems like price gouging to me. Is there anything to be done in this situation?
Is that a question for any one of us?
Yeah. I mean, so I did a little bit of research into dealer inventory, and it looks like the Telluride and its twin, the Hyundai Palisade, which is a very, very similar vehicle, although the Palisade's built in Korea, the Telluride's built in Georgia, that there actually is some inventory of these vehicles. It was slim before the pandemic. People wanted the car. Then there were some early issues because there was a factory supplier near the epicenter of the first outbreak in Wuhan that created some of the important parts for these vehicles, regardless of where they were built. So they were some of the first cars to have a slowdown of production. And now the cars that are on dealers are basically the cars that are there. But there are some out there. You may have to search a little further to a dealer that isn't very close by. But $4,000 over MSRP is
so even before coronavirus. I mean, they were reports of many dealers charging extra for the Telluride. So the Telluride was just out of the gate big hit. So I think. You're looking at it the right way. You know, if now the cost of the vehicle is higher, certainly look at other dealerships. Maybe that you could find the right, but if the vehicle's higher, then look at some other options. And the Highlander, you know, I mean, quite honestly, when driving the Highlander, it's not, I mean, look, I prefer the Telluride for a bunch of different reasons too. But I mean, the Highlander does have a lot going for it, especially if you're a type of person who is looking to keep this car a long time. If you're going to keep a car to 200,000 miles, yeah, my money would probably be with the Highlander over the Telluride, quite honestly.
Yeah. Ryan, I saw you give a thumbs up when he said Telluride. We love this car. Yeah,
it's a fantastic car. We're actually using it for tire testing this year. To test crossover size tires, and we were very pleased that we got to use that vehicle. It's just a comfortable, nice car. It's impressive what they did with that vehicle. And
also weight. I mean, that's another piece of advice. If you don't need this car right away, I have a feeling that Kia is going to build more of these. I think early production, sometimes cars are limited to how many they can make right off the bat. And I'm sure they projected this car was going to sell well, but I don't think. I mean, this was a runaway hit. So they're going to catch up. It happens with every car. They want to sell these cars. Kia doesn't want their dealers charging a $4,000 markup. They want to sell 10 times more cars. So wait a little while and you might see these prices go down. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, if you have any questions for us, we'd love to see you. So send us a video question at TalkingCars@iCloud.com. The other questions, we're working our way through them, and we hope to see you again real soon. Thanks for joining us and for Talking Cars with us.